Good morning. My name is Odie McKinley with the communications team here at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. First off, thank you to all the viewers and listeners that have joined us this morning. And as you may know, May 8th through the 12th is Economic Development Week. And today we have the privilege to hear from Quentin Messer Jr., Chief Executive and Executive Competitive Officer at the MEDC, about how the team and statewide economic partners are creating economic opportunity for residents and communities across the state. Good morning, Quentin. Thank you for taking time to chat with us today.
Hey, good morning, Odie. Always fun to tell people about why we do what we do and why it's so vitally important in the lives of 10 plus million Michiganders on both peninsulas.
Yeah. Well, let's start off by looking back over the past, say, 12 to 18 months. The MEDC has had many significant accomplishments, but there's so much more to economic development than transformational projects that make the headlines. Let's talk about what else the MEDC does and how does that complement the big things that we're seeing in the headlines?
Yeah, so it's a great question. If we pull back and we really think about, well, what is MEDC? What are the component teams of MEDC? We have Travel Michigan, responsible for the iconic Pure Michigan brand. We have small business, where we have literally, over the past 18 months or so, brought disparate elements of our team together to make sure that we deliver more impact to those businesses on both peninsulas that are really employing our friends and neighbors and are going to have and be able to grow more rapidly by having large customers. We are revitalizing downtown and really rebuilding communities. We know there's continued work to be done, but a part of that sometimes gets forgotten is the State Historic Preservation Office is part of MEDC. We also have a team, Arts and Cultural Council, making sure that the cultural traditions and rich heritage of Michigan continues to go forth in the future. One of the things that's critically important for people to understand is we understand that people and companies want a place. Companies of all sizes move to a place where they can grow, can recreate, they can have people be attracted to. We also are very focused on working with our partners at Leo, Michigan Works, and other partners, 2 and 4 year, and increasingly pre-K through 12 sector on talent. We know that that's vitally important as the economy changes. We have Industry 4.0 and other things. We have to create a state of lifelong learners. And then, we're working constantly to always message and tell the Michigan story. And how do we do that? Opportunities like this, working with our partners in the legislature, working with our partners in EOG. So there's so many things that go a part of the entire team. And I'm just happy to talk about some of those today.
Well, you mentioned small business and talent, and we'll get to that in a minute, I assume. But you also referenced all of our critical partners. And you often refer to a Team Michigan approach to economic development. Can you share with our listeners what does that mean and why is it important for our efforts across the state?
Sure. Really 3 reasons. One, I'm a huge sports fanatic. So anytime I can work in a sports analogy, I'm going to do it. And so you learn a lot, to me, about human character through the lens of sports, particularly team sports. And what we all realize is that it's not MEDC, it's not any individual person or agency or part of government, but it's all of us who come together to make this state as wonderful as it is, work on those areas in which we have to improve, and tell the stories. We all have to be ambassadors for our great state. We have to speak life into the state we want to create. And so that's why it's important to have a significant relationship with our local and regional economic development partners, our local and county units of government, our partners in the executive office led by our governor and lieutenant governor, our partners in the legislature, led by the quadrant and our chairs of the appropriates committee, Committee and the Community and Economic Development Committees in both the House and Senate, and countless others. But more importantly, it's really to make sure businesses and employees, our friends and neighbors, feel good about their upward trajectory. And if you look at any successful team in any sport, and we're now in NBA playoffs, which have been fantastic. The Tigers are sort of on a mini roll. Baseball is my weak sport. But you talk to anybody, they will tell you it is not a moment in time on which you evaluate your team. It's their trajectory upon which they're going. Because greatness is a journey, and that's collectively where we're going as a state. How to become consistently great in affording economic opportunities. And that's why it's going to take all of us. It's a team approach. No one takes the blame, and we share the credit.
Well, and you referenced this a couple times. The people of Michigan, Michiganders, are the foundation of our efforts. And you've been adamant that economic development only matters when people matter. Can you talk about the intentionality in equitable economic development, and what is the MEDC doing in that front?
That's a great question. I mean, look, all of us, I firmly believe I have the best job in the world, and certainly the best job in economic development. And my responsibility is really to think through how we can help this state, 10 plus million people, 83 counties, 2 peninsulas, over 2,000 municipalities. How can people further realize their economic hopes and dreams? I mean, if we go back and think about what are Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's hard to be an engaged parent and be supportive of your child's educational pursuits if you're economically vulnerable. It is difficult to be an engaged business owner if you are a person of color or a veteran or an individual with disabilities, and you have a great idea, but you can't get in and through those doors to make sure that capital and other resources are available to you. And because of that, you have to make sure that equitable, inclusive opportunities happen. And I'll just give one example. You could have the best pitcher on the mound for the Tigers, but if he's out there with only the catcher and nobody fielding behind him, he could be throwing strikes all day long. But the other team's going to win because there's nobody there to field the ball. And the same philosophy applies to economic development. You have to have a team that can take advantage of the opportunities that our small and business team is doing, working with partners like the small business development centers across the state, working with our smart zones, our Apex accelerators, for example. That's an entire group, an ecosystem that's making sure that there are opportunities for businesses across both peninsulas to succeed. And it takes a team. It's not going to be just MEDC or just the governor or just our legislative leaders or just our elected officials at county and regional levels. It's going to take all of us. So that's why that team framework is so important.
Well, and you mentioned it a moment ago, but then certainly just now about how small businesses are an important part of the ecosystem. Nearly half of Michigan workers are employed by small businesses. Where do these fit into the overall ecosystem? And can you give a little more focus on that and their importance for the state's overall economic health?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, the bedrock of any great team is to make sure that you win either in the trenches in football or in baseball is up the middle. If you have a strong catcher, pitcher, shortstop, and center fielder, you're going to be a championship team. And in essence, that's who our small businesses are. They are that heart of the lineup that makes sure that we can be successful as a state. So how do we do that? We view our role as being conveners, and I'm grateful to our 2 SVPs, Amy Rencher and Natalie Chimico. They work with incredible teams, whether it's Pure Michigan Business Connect, our work that we do in international trade, the work that we do increasingly to work with emerging developers, to work with people who haven't historically engaged with MEDC or with government, because there's a certain set of things that have to happen, those what must be truths. And I think one of the things, our responsibility, to simply put, for MEDC, it would be naive to think that we can touch directly all the small businesses across the state. There are probably hundreds of thousands of them, from micro businesses to businesses up to 500, which is how small businesses are defined. But what we can do is make the playbook, what must be true to be successful in engaging with government, more transparent. That is our obligation at a minimum. We obviously know there's work to be done. We're committed to doing that. And we're going to do it together as a team with those members of the ecosystem that I mentioned earlier.
Well, I'm going to try to do my best to channel my inner Quentin, but a talented team.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Trust and believe. There are a lot of people who will tell you that is a road to ruin. No one wants to channel what goes through my head.
Trust I don't know about that.
I don't even want to be there half the time.
Well, let's look at talented teams. They're filled with talent. So let's talk about that for a second. The state has undertaken a major targeted effort to grow the state's talent pipeline. What does that mean for our future? Why now?
It's a great question. And you're absolutely right. The number one asset of any company, any state, any relationship are the human beings involved, period, full stop. And because we have so many tremendous 2- and 4-year institutions, public and private, here in our state, we know that people will come to Michigan in the salad days of their lives. And, 18 to 26, thousands of people come to Michigan and choose to be here. The weather is the same. And I'm so parenthetical. I'm tired of people complaining about the weather. We can talk about that later or on a different conversation.
Yeah.
But the point is that we have to win by, candidly, in many respects, making sure that young people view Michigan as a viable option. To continue the sports team, Father Time is undefeated. And so you have to constantly think about the mix of veteran talent on a team, and you got to have young folks who are going to be there for the future. And that's no different than for any state or any county or any city. And we have to do that at Michigan. We are right now the 10th largest state by population in the United States. A couple decades ago, we were 8th. What's the consequences of that population loss? In 1970, there were 19 members of Congress from Michigan. Today, there are 13. We have wonderful bipartisan representation in our House, and we have 2 of the finest senators in the U.S. But there is a consequence if you do not continue to grow. And what that means is not only a loss in the size of your delegation, fewer electoral votes, less attention from Washington, and more importantly, the center of gravity, people start thinking differently about importance. We are truly an international state. We have 3 border crossings. But if people in Canada, whether they be in Quebec or Ontario or British Columbia, start thinking about the US and we're not growing, they're going to start thinking, I got to get to some other states that I'm not going to name, rather than considering a state that has 3 border crossings, significant border crossing, including the most active trade corridor. So that's why you have to grow. That's why you have to have programming that animates and captures young people and say, aha, I may go see the world, but I'm going to come back and build a life in Michigan. So that's the objective. In many respects, I am no different than Coach Tucker or Coach Harbaugh or Coach Howard or Coach Izzo or any other coach. you're trying to win the recruiting battle. And you got to win that battle on your home turf before you expect to win it anywhere else.
That's true. Population growth is key and will continue to be. And so as we look forward to the remainder of 23 and beyond, what opportunities are on the horizon for the MEDC and Team Michigan?
Sure. I mean, I think number one, the opportunity to just get better. You know, I look in the mirror every day and say, how can I be better? How can I be a better listener? I'm doing a lot of talking, but how can I listen? How can I be more accessible to people across both peninsulas, east and west, you know, semi-rural and urban, agriculture and advanced manufacturing? That's one. Two, how can we continue to make sure that we talk about those things we began with, providing greater resources and convening and representing and advocating for small businesses, working with organizations like SBAM as part of that Team Michigan? How can we work with the Michigan Manufacturers Association interests of manufacturing? How can we work with the Michigan Chamber on the interests of all businesses? Just yesterday, I had the great honor and privilege of talking to the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association and was on their great podcast. How can we make sure that that industry is thriving and doing well? How can we make sure that we're working with the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Detroit Regional Chamber, and BLM, and countless organizations to make sure that the policy is right? MEDC does not create a job. What we do is create the environment that job creators, those risk takers, say, aha, I've got options, but I am going to invest in Michigan. That's what I've got to get better about. Got to inspire people to play beyond themselves, break down silos, you know, make sure that I, as a leader, put people in a position to be successful. And that includes making sure that we have a day one ready workforce, making sure that we get our fair share of federal funds. Let me just say, parenthetically, if you think if one of the reasons why we've been so aggressive, while our governor has been so forceful about saying we're going to out hustle and out compete, why bipartisan members of our House and Senate are being very aggressive, there are billions of dollars, CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction Act, Build Back Better, programs through Departments of Commerce, Energy, and Defense, as an example, independent of how you feel about whether the government should be playing their role. That's the way the game is being called. And if companies across the world are going to come to the U.S., then we've got to make sure they come to Michigan. We're duty bound to compete and win those opportunities. So what you should look forward to, we're going to get better. We're going to be more aggressive. But we're also going to make sure that we have a developed focus on revitalization and placemaking. We're going to do RAP 2.0. We're going to do legislative changes to make sure that we can help communities of all sizes continue to develop their downtowns, their main streets. We're going to support SHPO. We're going to support the Michigan Arts and Cultural Council. We're going to do all those elements that make MEDC better positioned to go and win capital and resources on behalf of our friends and neighbors. That's what we're duty bound to do, and that's what we aspire to do.
Well, we thank you very much. We know that you're a busy man helping businesses of all sizes and Michiganders in every corner of the state. So we wanted to thank you for joining us today to highlight some of the importance of economic development and in creating long-term economic opportunity in the state.
Odie, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you and Drew and Nick and everybody, Samantha. There are a whole lot of people who come together to make these things happen. And I firmly believe I'll leave people on three things. Gratitude is the seed of the moment. So if you want more, I think you try to be grateful. I don't always get it right, but I try to be grateful because I want more. I want the greater. And I think that's the one thing. Two, we have so much to feel good about in Michigan. Doesn't mean that we're perfect, but we have to never lose sight of what we've been blessed to be a part of in this great state. Scenic beauty, unprecedented innovation, proximity to another international market, great airlift from wonderful airport. Just imagine what we have. And the last thing, The Lions are going to go 11-6 and win the NFC North. Trust and believe. I believe in Dan Campbell.
Outstanding. I look forward to it.
Indeed.
Well, Quentin, again, thank you so very much for your time. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. To learn more about the MEDC and services and our services, visit michiganbusiness.org. Thanks, everybody. Have an incredible week.